Okay, welcome to Area Study 2 for your VCE Economics Unit 3, Introduction to Macroeconomics. We'll look at a number of different things from a macro point of view, so we're looking at Australia as an entire economy. First thing we're going to look at is output in an economy and economic growth. So today's initial lesson is gross domestic product, or simply GDP. So what is GDP? Value of a nation's output. Nice and simple. However, will that get you any marks on an exam? Probably not. However, if you ask to define GDP, it's the value of all final goods and services produced during a period of time in a certain area or country. And as I'll explain later, geographical boundaries become very, very important here. Final product is one that is sold in its final form. It is not a smaller part of another product. So we have an example. Commiland produces peanut butter and light bulbs. In year one, 6,000 jars of peanut butter at $1 each, 4,000 light bulbs at $2 each is the whole year's production. Excuse me. Total production is $6,000 plus $8,000, 6,000 here, 8,000 here, GDP 14,000. So Commiland's GDP for this year is $14,000. Okay, so what is included in GDP? All legally produced final goods and services produced for purchase by consumers, businesses and government. A number of important words in that. Legally is an important word, and final. Produced for purchase as well. Okay, one point to note in here is businesses. It is all businesses within the borders of the particular country. So every business within Australia, we look at their final goods and services in order to calculate the value of GDP, irrespective of where that business's original location is. For example, if an American business sets up in Australia, the value of the goods and services produced by that business are measured in Australia's GDP, even though it is an American business. Because those goods are produced in Australia, they are part of our GDP. Conversely, if an Australian business sets up in Thailand, whatever is produced by that Australian business is in Thailand's GDP, not Australia's GDP. So this is what I was saying, the geographical borders become very, very important. Final products are those that are consumed or used in their final stage. And again, we'll come back to that in a second. So what is excluded from GDP? Well, the first thing that's excluded is what we call intermediate goods, and this is what I'm saying about final products. So goods used in the production process of another good. We'll go with tyres for cars. If a tyre is bought by Holden in order to go on the new Commodore and they're going to sell that, then that tyre is part of the production process. It's an intermediate good. It's used in a smaller, it's used to produce the good, so therefore it is not part of GDP. However, if I'm driving my Commodore down the road and I get a flat and I pull into Goodyear and I buy a tyre, then the sale or the value of that tyre is part of GDP because it's being used for its final purpose. Okay, so the easiest way to remember it is no matter what the good is, if it's going to be used in the production process of another good, it is not part of GDP, but if it's being used in its final purpose, then it is. So just think of tyres. There are various others. There's hard drives for computer. If I go to the local computer shop and I buy a hard drive for my personal home computer, then that is part of GDP. But if I'm a computer manufacturer and I'm buying hard drives to stick in my computers and those computers will then be sold, the value of the hard drive is not part of GDP because when the final product, the computer or the car is sold, then the value of the whole computer or the whole car becomes part of GDP. So the value of the smaller components are sort of incorporated into that value. Used products. Used products are not part of GDP because the original value would have been included whenever they were previously sold. So if I buy a car second hand, even though I may spend $15,000, $20,000 on it, it's not part of GDP because when that car was originally made back 3-4 years ago, then that would have been in GDP then. Financial transactions, share purchases, welfare payments are not part of GDP. Share purchases, because it sort of also can tie in with this one as a used product because we're buying shares and then we're selling them, so it's sort of like a used product anyway. But share purchases are not included. However, and here's a little tricky one just to sort of make you go a little bit grayer. While the value of the share purchase is not included, if you go through a financial advisor or whatever and they charge you commission, their commission is included in GDP because they have provided a service. Okay, government welfare payments are not part of GDP. Non-reported transactions. Do-it-yourself home improvements. So you go down to your local Bunnings and you may buy $10,000 worth of stuff to build a new shed or something out the back, while the $10,000 worth of stuff that you bought from Bunnings will be included in GDP, the value of the shed that you buy will not be. Black market transactions, drugs, prostitution, well, these are non-reported transactions, therefore they're not included in GDP. They're not necessarily going to hold their hands up and go, yes, I'm a drug dealer, therefore please include me in GDP. They're not going to do it. We also have other things, non-reported, barter system, which we also become quite prevalent in Cyprus because of their recent problems. But anything to do with barter is not included in GDP, yet it still could be final goods and services. Also, a number of businesses trade on cash. If they don't report all their cash, well then we can't have a true value of GDP. So there are issues with GDP. Barter system, as I said before, shopping services and or products. Okay, so that's GDP. Let's have a look at economic growth over the business, our old friend the business cycle, which we went last year. Very quickly, fluctuations in the business cycle can be due to climate, changes in demand, or GFCs, global financial crises. So climate, as we saw a couple of years ago with Cyclone Yasi and the bananas going from $3 a kilo up to $16 a kilo. Changes in demand, people just simply changing their mind. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with the changes in demand with regards to iPhones, based on the new Samsung coming out, all that sort of stuff. So here's our old friend, the business cycle. Shows that economies go through. So this area here is our boom area. Now, our boom areas, we'll look at that in a sec. Downturn or slowdown. Down here on our recessions. And up here. So going back to our boom area, what we have here for the boom, our production capacity is pretty much reached. We have a labour shortage generally because businesses are booming. They're employing lots and lots of people. And prices tend to be on the rise here, which can lead to high inflation. We then have our slowdown. Now the economy is starting to slow down. Generally at this point, if the economy is getting too far out of control, you'll find that the RBA may step in and raise interest rates in order to slow the economy down. So we'll move into a slowdown. Unemployment tends to rise because some businesses are, not only is production slowing down, some businesses are closing, so unemployment will come up. And the general economic outlook tends to be a bit cautious. People are a bit worried about where we're going. We have come down here to recession. Recession is two consecutive periods of negative economic growth. We have low levels of demand, generally high unemployment, and it's going to stay that way unless there is an increase in demand or government steps in for some reason or other. And then we can lead back up to expansion. There is an increased demand for resources because economic outlook tends to be positive. People tend to invest, people are out there buying, and unemployment is decreasing, and again we go through it again. So as a quick recap there, expansion, increased demand, low unemployment. Boom, shortages see prices start to rise. Slowdown, unemployment rises, business confidence down. And in recession, 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP growth, low demand, high unemployment. Okay, just a simple recap on what we've done. GDP, total value of goods and services produced by a nation. Used to measure economic growth, has limitations, excludes many products. Now, business cycle, boom, slowdown, recession, and expansion. Okay, one last final point. Important. When answering questions on economic growth, use the language of economics. Use the term boom. Use the term recession. Don't write, oh, people are really, really worried about the economy. Right, we are in a recession. This is what a recession is. Define these terms. Okay? Give full explanations of what they say. Don't just write, oh, the business cycle shows a boom. Tell us what a boom is. This is where you're going to earn your marks. Use definitions. Use terms, definitions. Refer to current statistics. Remember, we've looked, all economics teachers will tell you the importance of statistics and should keep up to date with current statistics. Use real life examples if you have got one. I mean, we talked about before all sorts of things, economic growth and effects of climate. So if you're using how climate can affect certain things, talk about Cyclone Yasi, talk about the bananas, use real life examples and always show the relationship, how one event affects another. So the cyclone affected the bananas, that's affecting supply. Well, you know what? That may have also increased demand for apples, things like that. Okay? You know the 4 points in answering an economics question. 1, define the factor. 2, make the link. 3, explain what's going to happen. 4, draw your conclusion. Okay? Done. See you the next one.